Sheri at the beach. So I wanted to provide a quick DHHS overview. My colleagues in the room will help me if I get any of this wrong, but the goal is assisting Mainers and particularly families. So there's some statistics you can see listed there in terms of main care services, child and family services, as well as the work being done with adults throughout the state. So for those that are unfamiliar with DHHS, I think this is a great overview that will give you a sense of the reach that this particular department serves within our state. This is a little bit to speak to where this program came from. So the goal is, it's a marathon, not a sprint, which I think is something we hear all the time, but we wanted to make sure that the understanding of HOPE, which is where we're going to start, is designed to kind of make a streamlined and rapid response that eliminates barriers. There's many conversations in the state about the barriers to access to education, earning a credential of value, all of those pieces. So this program is kind of an answer to some of those barriers. HOPE, which is the Higher Opportunities for Pathways to Employment program, can serve up to 500 students at one time. So right now, I've just been told, how many do we have? How many applicants did we get, Sheri?
200. We just hit our 200th application, and we have enrolled 115.
There's no annual limit for how many students can participate. So it's not necessarily 500 per year. There's going to be kind of overlap because the program follows them as they go through. So it's not a hard and fast annual limit. So I wanted to make that clear as we go forward. We're not having any technical difficulties. We're going to dive into the requirements here, and I may end up deferring to my colleagues in the room if I misspeak or say anything. Certainly, we've listed them all here. We're going to start with the non-financial requirements. So what is eligible, what the eligibility requirements. Oh, the slides aren't moving. Hold on. Technical difficulties. Somebody let me know if this is better. It should be a screen that says non-financial requirements for HOPE eligibility. Okay, so everyone sees it now. Sorry about that. Did not have anyone to test with in the beginning for that. This is whatever happens, we planned it this way, right? So now you can see the listing of non-financial requirements for the HOPE program. We're gonna start with talking about HOPE and then move into the parents as scholars and then finish with kind of how they're similar and how they're different. The key here is, are they a parent or caretaker relative of a minor child? And we'll talk towards the end about some sort of triage questions you can work with to help potentially identify applicants. But the key is parents or caretaker relative of a minor child or a pregnant person. So who is in their 6th month of pregnancy or after. Main residence ages 16 to 64. 64 a hard and fast cutoff. I'm assuming you probably don't get many in the older groupings.
Typically, we don't.
Correct. U.S. citizens or qualified non-citizens, which I think falls in the same kinds of categories as for federal financial aid, although there are some circumstances where there may be exceptions for folks seeking asylum, all of that. So I can throw together some clarifying points on that via email after the webinar. The folks that are applying for HOPE should not be receiving a TANF cash benefit. They are accepted to or enrolled in an eligible training or education program. And so we're going to talk about what that is in the next slide in the non-financial requirements piece. In the a little bit later on. They have to be making satisfactory progress, which is true for financial aid eligibility as well. They have the aptitude to complete the program of study. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the aptitude piece means for that?
I was quickly looking. This is a program intended for low-income parents, and so I don't see that it says that there's an, oh, never mind. That's the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay. Aptitude, satisfactory academic progress would be for people who are currently enrolled in, and they are progressing per the requirements of their institution. Aptitude speaks to students who have applied for and have not succeeded a number of times in the same course repeatedly. And so we would examine what has changed that would make them more successful this time around.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. They can't be disqualified from TANF for certain reasons, and they must lack a marketable bachelor's degree. So we were talking right before this started about kind of that as a common question in terms of what is considered marketable. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, just for clarification's sake?
Marketable bachelor's degree have some specific questions. Typically, if someone has a bachelor's degree, it is considered marketable unless it prepared an individual for a job which they are no longer capable of performing, or if it prepared them for an industry that is outdated or outmoded, and if they have not used that degree in 15 years or more.
15 years or more, wow. Mm-hmm. So that's a long span of time.
Right.
Here are some little bit further clarification of that in writing, so you can kind of understand what we mean by the bachelor's degree program must be a healthcare, technology, engineering. This is also available to folks doing short-term type of programs, certificates, those pieces leading to a credential of value, which is the catchphrase that we're all used to hearing, but it's really about specific training that leads to employment. That's kind of the goal of this piece of it. Just gonna double check for any questions. Financial requirements, kind of setting the scene for the big kicker. So in order to be eligible based on financial requirements, countable gross income has to be at or below 185% of the federal poverty level, and some forms of income are not counted, which would be which form?
Any child support coming in or going out of the household is not counted.
So there's a link there for the federal poverty level. So you can refer back to that for specifics on that question. And then countable assets equal to or below $10,000. So in total, assets that aren't counted, such as your primary home and vehicle, which again is the same for financial aid purposes. Anything else that sticks out there that you would want them to know? Probably most like personal property, those kinds of things wouldn't be counted.
And what's really important for this is we only count the assets for the applicant. So if it's a husband and wife, and the husband is applying for HOPE, and the wife has 2 boats in her name, we don't count those assets. It's only for the applicant.
Got it. That's important to know, and we'll get a little bit more into that when we talk about the household piece of it too, right? So it's really about the applicant, not necessarily looking at broader.
Right. We look at the income for the entire family unit. When it comes to assets, however, we're only counting the applicants.
So the way this is structured is really about wraparound support. So we'll talk about the nitty gritty. There's a chart in the slide deck that kind of goes over what is covered, but another critical piece of this is that they're navigators. So there's wraparound support. So not only are there the support services to really help address and break through the financial barriers, but there are non-financial barriers at work and all kinds of things that require kind of a person-to-person support and a place to go and a point of contact. And so that's the other piece, is that there are trained navigators that provide support for navigating campus or knowing where to find a certain resource, or all of the above. So I think that that's not only, as you're talking with students that might potentially be applicants and, you know, trying to encourage them to be a part of the program or to apply, is to really stress that there's this other level that includes wraparound support and a point of contact person. Here is the listing of what support services are available. So I won't spend too much time diving into these specifically. You'll have this as a reference to look back on. Really, the support services are intended to meet an unmet need and require hope pre-approval. So certainly the participant can inquire about anything and will be, you know, reviewed kind of on a case-by-case basis to see what can be covered. The current tuition and fees, you know, is a $6,000 limit annually. The prior tuition and fees is an outstanding balance at the university that's preventing enrollment. We did kind of have a offline discussion about what happens if that balance is at a collections agency, which gets a little bit more complicated. So certainly that could be something to navigate closely between the Hope Navigator, Sheri, and the student. We don't have a good solution there yet, but the conversation is happening. So just be mindful of that. Anything else you want to give a little bit more specifics on, Sheri?
I do want to say that this is really innovative part of our program is the prior tuition and fees owed to a university. The HOPE program is a post-enrollment program, meaning one is only eligible for HOPE when they have been accepted to or are enrolled in post-secondary training or education. What's really important for people to understand is someone has to be accepted to HOPE in order to access that $1,500 once in a lifetime payment for prior tuition and fees. So I just want to let you know that we have worked closely with the public colleges and universities, and they are aware that HOPE will need a conditional letter of admission to unlock eligibility for HOPE, which will then allow us to pay off that prior balance so that people can re-enroll.
Thank you for that clarification. And, you know, they all seem to be pretty much on board from what the conversations that I've been privy to. So that's excellent. So you've got the listing here of, you know, what constitutes, you know, vehicle transportation is like gas and that kind of thing. And then there's the specific, you know, vehicle repair, registration, all of that. So there's some nuances there, but the listing is available. A little bit more on the structure. There's no annual recertification. I saw somebody at the registration point had asked about, you know, is it renewable or do you have to reapply every year? And that's not the case. So once they're in the program, they're in the program so long as they're meeting those requirements.
Correct.
So that's again, a streamlined piece, right? There's no sort of, you have to reapply every year or submit new documentation unless it's for a new support service. The participants will have direct contact with the HOPE team. So I know Sheri's phone probably rings off the hook in her office. They have direct email, phone line, mailing address. It's a very, very high touch program by design. So that's, you know, a selling point, if you will, on the depth that this program goes into with the participants. There's a website that helps facilitate self-service. Is there anything I saw there's a Facebook group too. So there's some, you know, digital presence as well. Anything in particular on the website you would want to draw attention to?
There are two great pieces. There's a link to the federal poverty level on it. There is a link to the Department of Labor's CWRI, which is in order for us to be able to support a program, it must result in a credential of value that will unlock the opportunity for a job that has at least an average job outlook. So if you want to know if your job, intended job, has at least an average demand, that link is there. And then the forms page on our webpage is awesome because it has the PDF fillable application, which you can fill out, save, and email to us directly.
Perfect. Which takes us into the next piece about, great segue, takes us in the next piece about the application. So I did in the handout section of your webinar dashboard, the HOPE application is there in PDF form, but you can also click on the website to see it there. It can be mailed in, faxed in, or emailed. So can they order applications to have on hand? How do they go about, like, folks on the call having applications on hand to hand out?
Just send me an email, and if I still have a supply, they're going fast, I'll send them out to you.
I know that is something, like I have a little stack that I've now given to our team to be able to distribute. Just checking for questions. Is non-taxable income such as VA disability counted?
Non-taxable income.
Okay, yeah, yes is the answer we're getting, but I will make sure I have a little bit more detail on that. We've got the team here, this is good. I certainly would not have been able to answer that question, so I am grateful for that. If there's nothing pressing at the moment, we're gonna move on to talking about the Parents as Scholars program. So you're gonna note that these are fairly similar in terms of the purpose, the intention, and even some of the supports, but they are a little bit nuanced, and we wanted to include this because there's space for lots of students, and it's very underutilized as far as I can tell at the moment, but I often in the field have gotten questions about, in the past, I'm a single mom, are there programs for me? And I'll be honest, I didn't know that there were necessarily. So I think that it's very important to mention this as well as part of that program. I wish I had kind of known about it when I was in a financial aid office setting. So I'm hoping that this will continue to spread the word and boost the enrollment into some of these other things. The Parents as Scholars program is a program that helps low-income parents in 2- or 4-year college programs. So that's one of the kind of nuanced differences. It's really about those specific 2-year or 4-year programs, and it's run through DHHS Aspire for TANF qualified participants. So that's a very big alphabet soup. I've spelled out the acronyms there for you, but it's kind of program specific in that way. All of the same financial and non-financial eligibility requirements apply to TANF, apply to Parents as Scholars. So if they're participating in the TANF program, then they're eligible for Parents as Scholars, is the sort of key takeaway there. Again, we'll start with the non-financial requirements. So they are the parent or specified relative of a dependent child whom they maintain a home for. So in the household, or a pregnant person in their 3rd trimester. So the key with both of these is that the student participant is a parent. A Maine resident, a U.S. citizen or qualified non-citizen. They must cooperate with child support enforcement and participate with the Aspire program requirements. Okay. Forward there. For financial requirements, this is again slightly different. Countable TANF income has to be at or below the applicable standard of need based on household size and shelter expenses. Do you want to clarify a little on that?
The standard of need is determined by the state of Maine through policy. It is adjusted on an annual basis, not tied to the poverty level. It is published on maine.gov each year.
Okay, so not tied to poverty level, but published information exists that people could go look at. Okay, and this one, the countable assets have to be below $2,000. So quite a spread there in terms of the difference between that and the HOPE program. Again, some assets are not counted, such as primary residence, vehicle, those sorts of things. Parents of scholars specific requirements. So they have to be matriculated into that 2 or 4 year degree program. So we're talking an associate's or a bachelor's. They do not have the skills to earn at least 85% of Maine's median wage. They have the aptitude to complete the program of study, and we talked a little bit about aptitude with our HOPE discussion. They are not disqualified from TANF for certain reasons, so they have to be meeting those qualifications. They lack a marketable skill, and they must be enrolled full-time as determined by the institution. So that's a pretty specific difference. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but they have to be a full-time student in order to be participating in Parents as Scholars. So again, we've given you a chart to kind of refer to in terms of what benefits are available. So some similarities here in terms of what can and can't be covered. Won't dive too far into them. You've got the information there, but some of them refer to calendar year. So we've listed below that that's January 1 to December 31. A weekly is Sunday to Saturday. I think that's important to kind of understand those start and end rates. Anything, Dawn, you wanted to, or Alexandria, to say specific to any of these that stand out or common questions?
Nope, I think they're pretty clear, and
Yes.
if someone had a special request, I would certainly entertain.
Yeah, a lot of this is, anything that comes up, it's always worthwhile to ask the question. It really depends on case-by-case evaluation of certain requests. That's true for both programs. So applying for TANF for Parents of Scholars, we've linked the online piece there. You can do it by mail, in person, the local DHHS office. The paper application is linked there as well. Again, I'm assuming folks could get applications to have on hand if they would like to. Great. They could indicate to their Aspire case manager that they're interested. So if they're already participating in the program and they're meeting with their case manager and they indicate, I'm interested in this, that's their case manager would follow up and walk them through that process. There are some specific verifications that they'll need. So they've said, okay, I'm interested. They need the acceptance letter, the financial aid offer, the class schedule, and the tuition bill as part of the application material. We kind of charted out the differences, the things that really stick out for these two programs. So as you're thinking about your populations or particular students you're working with, these are the things that are good to know. I think really one of the bigger differences is that for HOPE, they can be enrolled at least half-time, and Parents as Scholars is a full-time requirement as determined by the institution. So I think that's, and that speaks to some of the types of certificates and training that HOPE allows rather. Again, the tweak in the income requirements, for HOPE, it must be at or below the poverty level versus how PASS operates. So we've tried to make those as clear as possible in terms of what the key differences are there.
And one thing that we have to be really cognizant of is it's either or. You either are working with the Parents of Scholars program and TANF, or you're working with the HOPE.
Yeah.
One cannot be co-enrolled in PASS and HOPE.
Correct. I think there was a question too about how these kind of interact with each other and with other sorts of programs. So I think that's a really good designation. If they don't fit in, if a parent is looking for services and they don't fit into one, it's possible they're going to fit into the other, but they can't be essentially enrolled in both. I'm going to tackle some questions here. I saw a few pop up. Okay, this is a good one. Do these programs apply to graduate courses to further a degree? For example, a 50-year-old man who has a BS in business works as an ed tech and is taking master's classes to become a special ed teacher.
I will say in both programs, The assistance stops when one is awarded a bachelor's degree. No advanced degrees.
No advanced degrees. When the $3,500 is applied in Parents as Scholars, is it after Pell has been applied? So I think maybe there's, this would be a good time to kind of talk about sort of how it works in terms of financial aid and when and how these supports are paid.
So our funds are used once the unmet need has been determined, and that's not including loans, but scholarships and grants. So if they've already received money in their as a scholarship, then we would look to them to use that money to pay the bills.
Yeah, and the same is true for Hope. So it's kind of filling that unmet need. So after any financial aid determination has been made, and I'm asking a ringer question here just so the broader audience knows, are funds ever paid directly to the student?
Not in my program. You mean tuition supports?
Or, let's say their vehicle breaks down and they're submitting to you, I had my car fixed. Are you paying the provider of the service, or are you providing the money directly to the student?
I think our programs do it differently.
Okay.
Because I am considered non-assistance, I pay directly to a vendor for textbooks, computers, car repairs, and the only time that really cash is going on to someone's, going directly to the individual would be for commuting costs, because we pay that Friday before that Monday when they're going to school. Everything, however, is a case-by-case basis, and there are instances where we would reimburse someone who had already paid the vendor. But typically, my payments are always going from Hope directly to the vendor. Pass has a different.
We pay most supports to a vendor where we can, like an auto repair or childcare, but transportation dollars go directly to the student. So clothing would be the same, and we would ask just for receipts.
Sure. Got to document all of the purchases and things. Yep. Great. Just a few things in terms of you all as potential providers and sort of you're hearing things from students that they may need additional support. One thing is making the applications available. So getting to Sheri and saying, keeping some on hand. Certainly we don't expect, I'm not an expert. We don't expect anyone to memorize this and become experts and determine eligibility. We wouldn't want that anyway, but just having the applications available, and then the program experts will determine who qualifies and who doesn't. But one easy thing to do is to really make those applications available. And then if they self-identify that they're already receiving assistance. So if you're working with a student and they're saying that they're on TANF and they're a parent, absolutely, you should follow up about Parents as Scholars and find out if you qualify. Some of it may be that they heard about it once and it fell out of their brain, and then they need to be reminded again. So that's, I'm sure they're told at enrollment that this is a potential option, but they're also told a lot of other things, right? So I think just if they're self-identifying, I know some of this, and we'll talk about stigma in the next point, can be a little tricky to navigate, but certainly if they're self-identifying about their circumstances.
And it's also important to know that Aspire supports education, college level courses for people who are attending part-time. They won't be in Parents as Scholars,
right?
But they'll receive very similar supports.
Right. So, there's certainly resources out there to help families get through this process and earn that credential. So really just sort of saying there are some programs available, and just give them the information and let them know where to find it, send them to the web, provide the applications. I know the Hope application in particular says, here's some stuff you need to know in order to qualify. So it's just giving them that gives them enough information to decide whether or not to apply. And then really emphasizing the navigator support and the network that they're getting, not just beyond the monetary support, having a point of contact, particularly with things like navigating campus resources and having a point person to ask questions to, I think is really important. And that is one that is not common in lots of programs that provide financial support. So I think that's a real key, especially if the person is someone that's going to need that extra layer of support. I asked Sheri when we were building this sort of is there a key thing, a sort of questionnaire that can be used by professionals to identify who might be a good candidate. So I sort of put 3 screener questions out there. So these are the ones, like, if you're communicating with a student, that you could ask that would identify whether or not they might be a good candidate. How many children under age 18 are living in the household? So they have to answer more than 0. So they have to be a parent or an expectant parent. Have you previously earned a bachelor's degree? Again, we've kind of talked about that. It can be a yes, but will need to be evaluated in terms of, is it marketable? Does it meet their qualifications? All of that. But certainly if they say no, we know that they've checked that box. And then where have you been accepted to, or where are you currently enrolled? So an acceptance letter is key for both programs. I'm going to take some more questions as we've got time. How are foreign degrees viewed? So in terms of if someone already has maybe, let's say, a foreign bachelor's degree or things like that.
So Aspire will send their degree, their foreign, if they have their transcripts, have them translated into English if necessary. We send them to a place, I'm sorry, I don't know the name, in Boston.
Yeah.
And so they come back with what their American equivalent is.
Yeah.
And if necessary or needed, we will pay for the courses to bring them up.
That's great. Yep. And then same for Hope, I would say.
The Hope program doesn't have as generous of a support service. We can pay up to $500 to have that translated.
Okay.
It may not cover the entire cost of having it translated.
Yeah. We know that from other things that could be a very pricey process. But certainly having a foreign bachelor's degree doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to be eligible, right? So it's really about what's the equivalency, and then looking at it once we have the information in English.
And is it recognized by the licensing board,
Correct.
a professional licensing board in Maine? If it's not recognized, then we will help Hope and PASS will help them achieve, get the
Whatever that level
right.
is. Yeah, that's excellent. And then we had another question, can a senior in high school apply?
If a senior in high school for the Hope program is a parent and is accepted to and enrolled in college. So there are many programs that have the dual purpose of allowing a student to take a class or 2 classes or 3 classes at the college, and it fulfills high school graduation and college coursework. If they're in one of those degree programs, we can do that.
Yeah, but if not, then it would be once they actually are enrolled and matriculated, then they would be encouraged to apply.
We only support post-secondary education.
Yep.
And the senior in high school for TANF purposes would not be able to apply on behalf of themselves, even if they are a parent, because they would still be considered a dependent child themselves if they were still residing at home. If they were not residing in their parents' home, then that's another discussion.
Sure. Okay. So, I mean, the moral of a lot of this story is it depends, right? So a lot of case-by-case circumstances, which I think is also kind of a theme in financial aid circumstances and appeals and those sorts of things. So really, it's a matter of it can never hurt to ask. And for you all as providers who are working directly with students, thinking about those 3 questions and making applications available and using this presentation as a reference and knowing where to go for assistance, I think are really the keys there. I mean, you can always encourage someone to apply. They're either going to meet the requirements or not, but certainly just word of mouth, letting them know that these programs are available, I think is key, especially where there's so many spots available, particularly 2,000 for parents of scholars and 500 at a time for Hope. That's a wide reach to help a lot of Mainers. So even just getting the word out there, I think will serve everyone well. One more check for questions. Otherwise, if there are no other questions, we will wrap up unless there's any final points to drive home. I would like to thank these three ladies for being in the room with me and the multiple drafts of this presentation that got circulated. We wanted to make sure that we provided the most accurate and up-to-date information for everyone. You have direct line to them by way of this, and so certainly feel free to reach out to FAME and we can point you in the right direction as well, but feel free to ask any questions direct via email. Otherwise, thank you all for participating.
Oh, thank you, Maria.
Oh,
thank you,
I just wanted to make sure we got to thank you.
All right.